anybody has difficulty with English, I know there are quite a few apps that can do like real-time translation. So it's always an option. And even for anybody who wants to come watch in Portuguese, they can have it translated into English real time as well. So always an option, right? Technology is there to help us. So we always start with a text, usually from the Living Spring collection, just to calm down, to get into the right frequency, to get into the right mood. We do announcements if we have any. We do an initial prayer. We do the talk. Everybody's welcome to participate. At the end, we do a final prayer, and we have passes right here behind me. Okay? And after the passes, everybody's welcome to come, stay a little bit longer outside, talk, right? I haven't seen you without a beard in a very long time.
Yeah, me too.
You look younger. Yeah. Okay, so announcements first. Next Sunday, I think 6 times a year at least.
Yes.
Yeah, at least 6 times a year, sometimes more. We do fundraisers to help us pay the bills, because we do have to pay bills, unfortunately. Next Sunday, we're going to have one such activity. So we're going to have a soup lunch. Anybody is welcome to come participate. You can help us by bringing a soup or cream or something to eat. You can participate by donating, but anybody is welcome, even if you can't donate, even if you can't bring something. The idea is not just to raise money, but also to come together as a community, also to strengthen our bonds, our friendship. So everybody is welcome, regardless of the situation. Okay? Any questions?
Okay. It has nothing to do with that. I just wanted to let parents know that we brought a lot of books to donate. They're like children books, and there are lots of GBs also from Turma da Mônica in Portuguese and all that. If anybody wants to take a peek and take what you want, that would be great. It's outside.
Okay, yeah, not necessarily Spiritist, but thank you.
The Spirit's book I donated to FSS.
Thank you. Thank you as well. Oh yeah, and also for anybody who's new, we have a big library that anybody can borrow from. We just ask that you become a member first, so we have all your information. We have a bookstore outside as well. If there are any books you would like that we don't have, we can always see if we can order. So just come talk to somebody. You can come talk to me for anybody who's new, because you won't know who are the other people who coordinate the house. But yeah, you can come talk to me, and if I'm not the right person, I will point you in the right direction. All right. Why do I get Victor stuff? Victor! Help! Yeah, but now I lost my screen.
So you can start
I'm
talking.
technology challenged. Oh, what am I doing? Oh, extend. I went to second screen on.
Yeah.
All right.
Now you know the drill.
Well, don't expect me to remember the drill, though.
There.
Okay, so today we're going to read a text from The Way, the Truth, and the Life, Caminho, Verdade e Vida. And it's text number 111. No, mine, it's text 110. And it's called Successive Lives. And it's very connected to the theme we have today. Do not wonder at my having said, You must be born again. These are the words of Jesus in the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 7. And Emmanuel says, Jesus' word to Nicodemus was clear enough. Deviating from it to senseless interpretations may be understandable within the organized clergy, attentive to the injunctions of the human struggle, but never amongst minds who love the real truth. Reincarnation is a universal law. Without reincarnation, earthly existence would be a vortex of disorder and injustice. Under its light, we are able to understand every pain-filled occurrence along our pathway. Humanity has not yet grasped the full extent of the divine mercy in the process of redemption and readjustment. Among humankind, criminals are often condemned to cruel punishments, such as death or prolonged suffering. However, Providence corrects lovingly. It does not put offenders in damp, infected prisons. It only says that those involved in tragic events must change their clothing of flesh, body, and return to the stage of human activity so that they may redeem themselves. To magnanimous wisdom, not everyone who has made a mistake is a criminal, just as not every victim is pure and innocent. God does not see only the evil that results from a crime. He also knows the dark mechanism of every circumstance that led to that crime. The total criminal and the total victim are both unknown to humankind. The Father, however, sees the need of his children and periodically reunites them by the means of blood ties or the web of spiritually constructive commitments. Sorry. So that they may learn the law of love amid the difficulties and pains of destiny, and with the blessing of temporary forgetfulness of the past. Sorry. Just choked on myself.
Take your time.
I think I'm good.
Are you?
I think so. We'll see. Victor, can you get the lights, please?
Yeah.
Thanks. So let's close our eyes. Let's take a deep breath in and out. One more deep breath in and out. Last time, deep breath in and out. Dear Father of love, dear Master Jesus, dear spiritual friends and mentors of our house, we thank you for one more day that we will have so many opportunities to learn, so many opportunities to use our free will. And we ask you for strength, and we ask you for the wisdom to use our free will in the best possible way. We ask you to give us strength and to help us open our eyes to see and our ears to hear. Hear our good guardian angels, friendly spirits, all of those who are trying to push us in the right direction, who are trying to show us the best path for us. May this simple meeting today be a source of learning, be a source of not only knowledge, but love, warmth, and consolation to our hearts. May we leave here a little bit better than we came in. And may the content be some food for thought, for deep reflections. So, every time I close my eyes, when I open them, more people, yay! Bring me to tears.
I get so emotional.
Right. Okay. I showered this morning, so people can stay close to me, it's okay. But I am wearing perfume, so anybody allergic, sorry. Okay, so we started this talk in September. This is part 3. And there's so much to cover. It's a very polemic subject, and people also have a lot of doubts and questions about it every time we talk about suicide prevention. Because this is going to be the 3rd hour, actually last time we were here almost for an hour and a half. I don't know if everybody knows, but all of our talks are recorded and they are on our channel on YouTube. So I am gonna skip everything that we've already seen in the previous 2 Sundays, and I highly recommend that anybody who wants to know what we spoke about before, I highly recommend that you can always go to our channel and take a look at the previous 2 presentations. Okay? And they were I used a lot of material, but mostly the book Suicide False Solution, Suicídio Falsa Solução by Alírio de Cerqueira Filho. Of course, the Spirit's book. Gospel According to Spiritism, Heaven and Hell, like there's quite a bit of material here. And at the very end, I actually have a slide with a list of recommended reading for anybody who wants to know more about this, okay? So, let's get started. Alright, so birth is not a beginning, death is not an end. And for anybody who is new, everybody's welcome to participate, ask questions. Okay, so far, we talked about scientists who have done different kinds of studies and researches that proves that the spirit survives the body as an individuality, as an intelligence. We have looked at statistics. We have looked at numbers worldwide regarding suicide and specifically Canada. We have looked at warning signs for both adults and young people and children who are having suicidal thoughts or tendencies. This is all the 2 previous Sundays. We talked about the types of suicide, including direct or conscious, when you act to end your physical life. And we talked about indirect or unconscious suicide, which is not doing intentionally, but through behaviors that shorten our lives. We talked about the responsibility that indirect and unconscious suicide, we have a heavy responsibility in those cases because it wasn't an act of desperation that we ended our lives. It took us a long time. We had a lot of time to think about it, and we still insisted on those behaviors that would shorten our lives. So now we're moving on. So talking about the effects of suicide. In question 957, Allan Kardec asks the spirits, generally speaking, what are the effects of suicide on the state of the spirit? So what happens to the spirit right after the physical body dies? And the spirits answer, the consequence of suicide vary, so it's different, because the penalties it entails always correspond to the circumstances that have led to its occurrence. So it's not a cake recipe. It's not a rule. Every time this happens, that's the consequence. Every case is a different case. There are mitigating and aggravating circumstances. Everybody's situation is unique and individual and will be treated like that. Okay? And then they continue. The one unavoidable consequence is disappointment. Because when somebody commits suicide, mainly direct suicide, they think that the moment they kill their body, their suffering will stop. Because somebody who commits suicide usually is somebody who is suffering. So the suicide doesn't want to end their lives. They want to end their suffering. They want to stop suffering. Whatever the reason for the suffering is, they just want the suffering to stop. And they think that by ending life, that suffering will stop. So the unavoidable consequence is disappointment, because they will realize that they have not died. They did not achieve their objective, because we can't die. The spirit is still alive and will continue to be for eternity. The rest depends on the circumstances. Some of those who kill themselves atone for their fault right away. Others do so in a new human life that is even harder than the one whose course they have interrupted. Every case is a different case. Anybody has any questions or comments?
I think this is very consoling if you think about that each case is a case. It's not a recipe, not a cake recipe. So then you can also have that feeling that along with the law of mercy, every case will be analyzed, right?
Yes. And we in I can remember if both previous ones, or at least one of the previous talks we had with this theme, we were talking about obsession. Usually there is some kind of obsession involved with suicide. That is also taken into consideration. If you commit suicide in a state of like not being mentally healthy, that's taken into consideration. If somebody pushed you to it, like incarnated or discarnate, if somebody somehow influenced your decision, that will be taken into account. Your intention in the suicide will be taken into account. As we all know, there are, in some cultures, centuries ago, it was, if you made, depending on the mistake you made, if it was considered by society to be a huge mistake, it was your duty to kill yourself, not to embarrass the rest of your family or to save the rest of your family. That is taken into consideration if it's a cultural thing. In some cultures, when the husband died, the wife had to be buried with the husband alive. In some cultures, she had to set fire to herself to die with her husband.
Wow.
Is that considered suicide? No, she didn't have a choice. Right? So again, every circumstance is different. All the factors will be taken into account because God is merciful.
I remember I read something about that too here once, a few years back, that some cultures really want to understand what God is, so they kill themselves to thinking they would be closer to God.
Yeah. In the slide where I have the recommended reading, one of the recommended readings I have is in the book Heaven and Hell, or Divine Justice According to Spiritism. There is a chapter that talks about suicide. There are 9 examples of suicide. And then the spirits talk about how they ended up in that situation and what happened after they committed suicide. So one of those cases is a mother who lost her son, and she wanted to join her son. And she thought that by committing suicide, she would just simply join her son on the other side. But he died of natural causes. So, again, disappointment, because she absolutely did not end up where he was. Right? And to understand a little bit of what happens afterward, we need to understand the nature of our bodies, the nature of our incarnation. And it's like it's a triad, it's a triple nature. So we have the spirit, perispirit, and body. And anybody who was here yesterday for the FSS course saw this as well. So we have the spirit, which is pure energy, no matter. We have the perispirit and the body. The body is just the physical body, it's biological. The perispirit is what connects the spirit and the body. We will always have a perispirit. The more evolved we are, the more ethereal our perispirit becomes, the less dense it becomes. But the perispirit is the connection between the spirit and the body. And when we're talking about suicide, what happens is, depending on how we committed suicide, our perispirit might suffer some of the consequences. Okay? In heaven, in the 9 examples in Heaven and Hell, they talk about that. In the book Memoirs of a Suicide, they talk about that. In the book Suicide False Solution, they talk about that. So there are many examples that you can see, but then again, every case is a different case. So it's not because it happened to that spirit that the same thing is going to happen to me. We are all unique, okay? So, and if you read Memoirs of a Suicide or Suicide False Solution analyzes certain passages of Memoirs of a Suicide. The images are very graphic, and one of the reasons why it happens, a lot of people think it's punishment, but again, God is fair. It's not punishment. It's a simple consequence of our action. Anybody who was here yesterday heard it, and we talked about it before as well. For our reincarnation plan, we have a plan. So we are supposed to be here for a certain time, for a certain number of years. When we commit suicide, mainly at a younger age, our perispirit, which is the connection, is still soaked with that vital energy, with that vital fluid that was supposed to last us. If our plan was to live 60 years, that energy, that vital fluid, is supposed to last for 60 years. And if I commit suicide at 30, like my perispirit is still soaked with vital energy. And that doesn't just dissipate. So we end up being connected a little bit still to our physical body because of all that fluid. It's more complex than what I'm trying to explain. Allan Kardec gives a very simple, very direct and practical explanation. After that question 957 that we saw, there's a long commentary by Allan Kardec in the Spirit's book, where he gives a simple explanation of what I'm saying. So the perispirit is still somehow connected to the body, because we're still full of that vital energy. So in order for us to move on in our spiritual life, we'll have to wait for that energy to run out so that we can be rescued and start working on it again and start preparing, studying, learning in the spiritual realm, and preparing for the next. Okay? Any questions about that part? Okay. Either it's very clear or you guys don't want to talk. Okay, so continuing. Effects of suicide. So, something else that is a misconception. We have this idea that once we're over on the other side, not just for suicide, but for every situation, we have this conception that there will be a court, a jury of our peers who are going to judge us. There's no such thing. Our jury, our judgment is from our conscience, because that's where God put the divine laws. Our conscience is judging us. So there aren't other spirits who are judging us, sentencing, condemning, and punishing us. That's not how it happens. Because again, God is fair. So it's not a punishment. It's simply the effect of a cause brought on by the spirit themselves. So I commit the act, either direct or indirect. I smoke until I die of lung cancer. That's an indirect suicide. So what happens after is not a punishment. It's just the effect of a cause, right? The law of cause and effect. The cause are my actions. The effect is what my actions are going to bring. And this is related to our free will, how we use our free will, because we are always making the decisions. And our decisions, we have responsibility for them, and we are subject, the whole universe is subject to the law of cause and effect. Make sense? Yeah? Does anybody disagree? No? Okay. A merciful medial treatment. The physical body works to absorb the negative, harmful energy. So what is this? For example, we talked about this last time, and for anybody who has read other Spiritist works, you might have seen examples of somebody who, like in the book Memoirs of a Suicide, the best example is Camilo Castelo Branco, who is the main character of the book. And because he committed atrocities as a priest in the Saint Inquisition, in the Spanish Inquisition, one of them being he blinded a man, as part of his reincarnation plan, he agreed that in the last 10 years of his life, so he lived a full life, he agreed that in the last 10 years, just at the end, he would have become blind. Nobody would like blind him violently, but he would become naturally blind. His body, through a disease, he would become blind. And when it happens, he can't take the suffering, and he shoots himself in the ear and kills himself, right? So this is an example of the physical body absorbing the harmful energy. So he blinded somebody painfully and cruelly. Through God's mercy, he was going to be blind for 10 years, not suffering from a violent act from anybody else or anything like that. So his physical body in the last 10 years of his following reincarnation would be blind to absorb the negative and the harmful energies of what he did to someone else. Does it seem unfair? You are allowed to say yes, but everybody's allowed their own opinion.
Actually, it looks like he got a very good discount. Very mercy.
Right? Again, God's mercy.
75%.
Right?
Yeah. But then again, he didn't get it as a gift just because he was pretty. During the time between incarnations when he was in the spiritual world, he studied, he understood his mistakes. This is why he got mercy, because he
Mhm.
also did his part. He also worked to become a better person, to improve himself. Because even though he ended up committing suicide, that was a mistake, yes. However, he lived a full life, honestly, as a good person. He didn't do anything cruel to anybody else like he did in the previous life. So, God's mercy, right? I always, I like to use a word that is like the economy of our lives, right? So it's like you spend, you receive, right? So debt, credit. God will never allow anything to happen to us that is not in our life's economy. Never. If it happened to me, it's because God allowed, and if He allowed, it's not that I deserve, nothing like that. It's just that I have something to learn from that. It's possible that I can learn something from that experience. So nothing that is not in the economy of my life will happen to me. Make sense? Yeah? So, and in terms of like these, consequences in the future, the most important thing is to understand, again, that are aggravating and attenuating circumstances. And that's what's going to determine the consequences for later, right? So him studying, preparing, and all of that attenuated his circumstance. And we can all do that. So what matters most is our consciousness and our intentions. Intention is everything. What was our intention? What are our intentions with every decision we make, with every act, with every action we have, every action we make? Intentions are the most important thing. That's where our conscience knows how much we understand the divine laws, how much we understand the higher law of love, justice, and charity. So the most important thing is our intentions. And that's what's going to mitigate or aggravate, make it less bad, or worse. Okay? Yep.
If I'm hearing you correctly, though, this applies
Yes.
both while you're living and then when you pass. Even somebody who
Absolutely.
commits suicide, because you were mentioning this idea of peri-spirit and vitality that is still in us. The decisions we make in that period, the thoughts, the behaviors, the senses that we have, that in and of itself is going to affect how the peri-spirit itself is impacted and adjusts to the new reality that it may have had lots of energy in a living sense to maintain, but it could all, like you said, mitigate what ends up playing out at that point, right?
Yes, yeah. In terms of being rescued, really your vital energy has to run out. So that one, I think, is a hard one to get away from. And because of the lack of knowledge, because a lot of people, well, among 8 billion people, I want to say most people don't have this knowledge, this notion of the survival of the individuality, of the intelligence that you keep your individuality after you pass. That causes for a lot of confusion. So during those years, during that time where you're waiting for your vital fluid to run out, a lot of people absolutely don't understand what's happening to them. So in that situation makes it a little bit harder with the part of mitigation. But the moment they are rescued, that's where all of that, when like the higher, better than us spirits are helping us understand the situation and learn how we can move on from that, how we can fix the mistake we made, that's where that's gonna come into play, when we are well enough to understand. So in the case of Camilo Castelo Branco, just to illustrate, he was rescued, and after some treatments, he was finally able to kind of watch a movie of his previous lives. That's when he was able to understand the reason for his blindness. So at that moment, that's when the intention and circumstances of aggravation or mitigation will come into play. Make sense? Did I answer your question?
You did, but I guess what I'm thinking about, or extending what you're saying, is that regardless of how hard, regardless of how difficult, regardless of how finite it may seem, there's always a possibility.
Oh, yes.
And so even in the most dire of situations, there is room for mercy up to and including rescue, to use the word that you used,
yeah.
if the circumstances that are unique to that particular spirit play themselves out in the way to allow for it. Even though in 1,000 other cases, nobody ever got to that point, but this spirit, even in a more extreme situation, managed to, because for their circumstances, it was warranted. So there's always, I guess it's a sense, there's always hope. There's always hope.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Question 115. Doesn't matter how we all start without knowledge, we are all blank slates, and we have the mission of progressing until we get close to God. And once the spirit is created, we are not discreated. Once we're created, we exist for eternity.
Mm-hmm.
It's endless. It's infinite. So it may take longer and it may take a bit more suffering when we are stubborn, but we are all gonna get to perfection, to relative perfection. All.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's not there is hope in the sense of a maybe, it's there is hope for sure. It's just a matter of how long it's gonna take, depending on our own actions, our own decisions, how we use our free will.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question. I know you're talking about suicide, but
Yeah.
it was very interesting you saying, I never heard before about this connection of your spirit with the physical body.
Yes.
In the case, it's not suicide, but like a murder,
Mhm.
and this person is still full of vitality and many years ahead. What happens, and what about the mercy in this case? I don't know if you want to talk this about now. We can also talk after. But
Yeah, well, I will just address very quickly, but it's a completely different situation. It wasn't your own choice, right? Somebody did it to you. So you will receive enough assistance in order for you to move on, and so you will receive assistance with all that vitality and all of that. Yeah. There's way more than that, but I don't want to go into it, or we're going to run out of time.
But
But yeah.
Can I?
Hmm?
So when I know more about the Spiritism, I know because my dad was murdered. So I believe about murdering. There is, it's a totally different situation because it's two individuals' relation. I think it's a past life involvement. Then, and the suicide is your own choice. You consciously or unconsciously decide, put end your life or not. But when it's a murdering, it's another situation.
Yeah, it's a matter of whose responsibility
Yeah,
it is.
it's
but
a
what
responsibility.
about
The law of attraction, right? So probably was kind
It's
of
possible.
designed already for something that could
Yeah,
happen.
nobody comes to fail, so nobody comes to become a murderer. But let's say something that happens in Brazil sometimes, we call it like lost bullets. You get hit by a lost bullet in a fight that had nothing to do with you. That bullet wasn't really lost.
Yeah.
So that's what Mo is
Yeah.
talking about, like sort of by design. But for example, in an act of murder, nobody comes to be a murderer. Nobody's plan is to fail. Nobody. But it can happen, and it happens. But then in that case, we're going to see, again, the intentions. Where does responsibility lie more heavily?
Her question was also here about like the vital fluid. and the
Again,
very spirit.
the kind of help you're going to need is going to depend on that responsibility. Because with the suicide, it's your sole responsibility. With the murder, it wasn't something that you did. So you're gonna receive a different kind of help. And that help, that's what's gonna help exhaust that vital fluid.
But I understand, okay, the help will help exhaust it.
You kind of disconnect, like
Yes, yeah.
the soul or the spirit
Yeah.
from the body, like exhaust it a little bit quicker so you can
Yeah. A lot
just
of times,
receive the right support and assistance.
yeah, a lot of the times for the suicide case, the help is there.
Mhm.
They are trying to help, but the own energy of the person that committed don't allow to have this happen. Right?
Mhm.
In that case of a murder, that won't happen. So they will receive the help
Mhm.
faster.
Yeah, it all lies, the key is intention and consciousness. If it was like, it had nothing to do with your decision, you didn't commit the act, of course, you need to receive more assistance. Make sense? Yeah, you're welcome. So, and again, always with supervision, help, and support. So nobody will come with a physical disability that could be connected to a previous suicide without a lot of help from the spiritual world. We will always have, we have our guardian angels. Additional to guardian angels, we also have mentors. We have spirits who help guide and protect our families, or us as individuals, or us as professionals. So there's a whole lot of people behind this, right? A whole lot of spirits behind helping us succeed this time where we failed before. Yeah, makes sense? Depending on the case, they can be born relatively healthy but go through moral suffering. A very good example of this is the author of the book Memoirs of a Suicide. She had committed suicide 3 incarnations in a row. So in general terms, thinking about it, if we think about the body absorbing the negative energy, she would have come probably with several disabilities or something. She came with like not severe disabilities, very poor, but she agreed to be a medium and to write the books that would help other people understand the situation of suicides. So she was born considering the 3 suicides she had committed in 3 incarnations in a row. Considering her situation, she was born relatively healthy so that she could work on the books that she agreed to write to help other people. And they have. They have helped countless people and will continue to help. So again, aggravating, mitigating circumstances. So her agreeing to do that mitigated her circumstance. So she needed a relatively healthy body in order to work, in order to accomplish what she had agreed to do. Yep. Make sense?
It sounds like a part of this that's coming up, and that just the thought I feel like I was inspired with here is, based on what you were saying, is just the impact also of the law of mercy and how much this plays into the whole thing. And there's many ways to read it, but one way that I've always find has been heartwarming for me to read it is, God loves you so much, and this gets back to John's point about that individual burned the eyes and only made him 10 years that he'd have to be, even though he submitted somebody else to like a lifetime.
He got it from Timo for 90%.
Exactly. But it's this idea of God loves you so much that the plan is like, what's the bare minimum that God can create to get you to learn the lesson, but not have to experience a millisecond more of the discomfort that you need to,
or that you inflicted on someone else,
or that you've produced, on others.
Not an eye for an eye, not a tooth for a tooth.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, and when you kind of filter that through all of this, even what we consider the most extreme, dire situations like these disparaging, degrading suicidal effects, they're even more pronounced there because these people need it even more than in their circumstances, right? And so,
Yeah.
so I think that if I'm hearing you correctly, that's something that kind of weaves through this entire conversation.
Yes.
Is that yes, you need to learn, and God loves you so much that God wants you to learn as soon as possible, but in the most simple, benign, and limited way as well, so that there's not even a millisecond of waste.
Yeah, benign is a wonderful word for this, because that's exactly what it is.
And I think like when you think that the main goal of living is to evolve, you
Mhm.
have either two options. You either evolve by hard working, like sweat, or tears, right? Or pain. And this is just a way to kind of like focus on the goal. Like if you're taking a big detour, it's like, no, it will take you longer to come back
Exactly.
here. So how much, like the minimal, and if you think about a parent raising your child, what is the minimal that I can give? Like, oh, you don't go to a party tonight, let's say. So they learn that they need to focus more on
Mhm.
studying. So it's instead of thinking as a punishment, because sometimes like in some of other Christian religions are very based on punishment or inflicting
Because that's the easiest way to control, right?
yeah
Control by fear.
exactly. Instead of thinking like this is punishment, no, this is a consequence.
It's divine justice. Every wrong needs to be
Repaired.
repaired. Exactly.
It's how can you repair what you did.
Mhm.
So it's exactly that.
But one thing I was thinking about, I don't know if it's
Mhm.
my intuition or whatever, but seeing with a very optimistic side. For example, there's a huge example also following this logic about if you cause some damage to your body consciously and you come back with any physical, let's say, imperfection or handicap,
Disability?
Yeah,
Disability.
disability. And if you see, for example, the Paralympics, like in Paris, like it's kind of a bunch of suicidal people who see now in this existence in the sport another way to celebrate or to find a purpose in their life.
They could be. They
They
aren't
could
necessary.
be, they could be, like they could
don't
be, of
know.
course, but
Yeah.
can be like some of those souls.
Over
with-
instead of making the same mistake again, like for example with Bonnie who did it 3 incarnations in a row, they are trying to overcome.
Mhm.
I understand what you're saying. Perfect.
Yeah, so,
And when we fail a trial or an expiation, we need to do it again. Just like a school test. If you fail your test for 2nd grade, you can't expect to go to 3rd grade like nothing happened. Doesn't make sense, not logical, right? So until we learn what we're supposed to learn in a benign, loving way, we're not gonna move on. We're gonna come back, do it again, 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 do it again. And how many times we do it only depends on us. Do we wanna learn through love, through tears, or through misery? They are all our options.
And I think that can be a very counterintuitive lesson for us to learn when we're on this world, to the point that you made, one, because many religions focus on a punishment, a retribution punishment type of an approach. And actually even our society, our criminal system is oftentimes built around that. So we're used to seeing a world where you do wrong, now you suffer. Now you are put somewhere to suffer.
Exactly what
And-
the text says. In
yeah.
the justice of man, if
Yes.
you make a mistake, you need to be punished cruelly.
Yes.
Divine justice,
Is
no,
rehabilitated.
you're gonna learn, you're
Sorry.
gonna be rehabilitated with love.
But there is hope in the judicial system too when you make a mistake and you do community service. So this is different.
It depends, it all depends.
Of course.
But it's just an analogy.
Yeah, but I'm saying that even in our human system,
And
we
as-
kind of acknowledge
As
that.
humankind evolve, we
Yeah.
are gonna move all our laws, the consequences or punishments, the sentences, they're all gradually gonna become closer to the justice of God as we evolve, as we understand divine justice, we are gonna be able to apply something similar. Never the same because we're not God, but something closer to the divine law as opposed to something closer to what our egos say. Because I want mercy for myself, but anybody who did me wrong has to suffer. So that's some food for thought there. I don't want to suffer, but if anybody wronged me, oh, they got theirs coming. Right? So good reflection there for us. If we deserve mercy, everybody does. We're all God's children. He loves all of us. And the Spirit lives on. So, biggest disappointment is that we didn't really kill ourselves. And we unfortunately have to go through the motions, depending on our intentions, depending on mitigating or aggravating circumstances, all will be taken into consideration. But the fact that doesn't change is that the Spirit lives on. So, divine providence and divine mercy never, ever abandon us. So, at some point, everybody will be rescued. At some point, every single spirit will be. And if we think that our spirit was forgotten, everybody once had a mother. Mothers never forget their children. Friends, family, us, we can pray for completely strangers and ask spirits to rescue them. And it is effective. So nobody is abandoned. Nobody. Help will always be given to those who ask with sincere hearts. Our Father loves all of His children. So again, question 115. We are born blank slates. We live as many lives as we need to learn the divine laws and to get closer and closer to God, relative perfection, and complete happiness, complete bliss. This is bliss, not ignorance. Ignorance is not a bliss. Okay, so another sensitive point. Children and youth. Nowadays, with so much access to information, with social media, with cyberbullying, with all of that, it's hard. It's so hard for youth nowadays. When I was doing something stupid, there were no smartphones with cameras. Nobody was sharing pictures of anything stupid that I did to humiliate me for the rest of my life. It is hard on our youth. Living in the world nowadays is not easy. It's hard for parents, but it's even harder for them. So we need to pay attention to our actions. So what are we doing at home? Sometimes parents, it's not our intention, but we do bully our kids by making fun or putting them down or comparing them to other kids. Oh, why can't you be more like so-and-so's child? Right? We don't like to be compared. Do we do that to our kids? Exposing them to our vices and addictions. Right? So gambling, smoking, you name it, drinking, right? So it's hard to not be seen by our kids as hypocrites when you tell them not to drink, holding a glass of wine, saying, oh, I need a glass of wine every day to unwind, but you can't drink. It's bad for you. Mommy can, you can't. So we need to align a little more our actions and our speech. Oppressing them. Are we demanding more than they can give us, more than they can produce? And if we are, why? Why are we demanding more? Because someone else's child does better? Because we think that they have to be better than we were? Because we want to live our dreams through them? Letting them to lose. You know, like, oh, I'm not gonna argue with my child, I'm not gonna fight with my child. No, children need limits, because how do they know we care? It's a fine line between the oppression and the letting you lose, but try and error, and we'll get to a hopefully happy medium. Are we transferring our responsibilities to school, to daycare, to the Spiritist center? Like, who is responsible for teaching their kids to pray? Is it the church? Is it the Spiritist center? Who is responsible for teaching them right from wrong? So are we transferring our responsibilities as parents? Another very good section of the Spirit's book, when Allan Kardec asks about parenting, if it's a mission. And we have a few talks about that too. And what can we do in general when it comes to suicide? You're like, I'm not a suicide, I don't have anybody in my family. Is there any way I can help? Or I have somebody in my family, or a friend or someone. What can I do? Is there any way I can help? So connection with God, and this answers my previous questions. We're supposed to teach our children to pray. There is, in psychology, we talk about archetypes or models, and the mother for the child is the archetype or the model of God. So the mothers are usually the child's connection to God, to divine, to spirituality. So teaching our kids to pray is one of the most important things we can do. For divorced parents, or for widowers who don't have a wife, the father can become the mother very easily, right? It's done at home, it's done with love. Gospel at home, it's one of the healthiest habits we can have for ourselves, for our families. Oh, but it's so hard to do the gospel at home with kids, they don't concentrate. Maybe it's time to think outside the box. Maybe instead of reading from the Gospel according to Spiritism, when we have the kids, we can read from Pai Nosso or Our Father, that has like simpler texts that kids can follow. There are kids' books that we can use during the Gospel at home. You can use puppets, finger puppets. There are so many options. But doing the Gospel at home is so important to harmonize the house, for the health of the house and spiritual health of everybody. Talk. Have the hard conversations. Talk to your kids. I'm not telling anybody to do it, okay? It's just an example from my personal life. There is a Netflix series, and again, I'm not advising anybody to do this, please. But there's a Netflix series that is called 13 Reasons Why. And I sat down and I watched a few of the episodes with my son, and I used to explain to him why that vision was completely wrong based on Spiritist teachings. So, like, have the difficult talks. It's not easy to talk about this with your kids because they want to hide that kind of stuff from you. But through conversations, we find out things we had no idea. Observe their behavior with love and understanding. And this is not just for kids. This is for friends, family, anybody who you see. You have that feeling that something is not right with that person. They're smiling, but you can see that
something's off.
Yeah, something is off. You can feel the energy that something is off. So observe behavior, look for signs, and always remember to have compassion and fraternity. A lot of people distort the Spiritist idea of our life economy. Oh, God will never allow something to happen to me that is not in my life economy. Some people mistake this with the idea of, oh, then you deserve it. Oh, if that happened to that person, it's because they deserve it. Where's our compassion? Is that charitable? right? So always compassion and fraternity. No judgment. Everybody has their own circumstances. Everybody has their own situations. And even if any of us here are having suicidal thoughts or thinking, don't feel guilty. It could come from other influences. Look for help. Try to talk to somebody. Here at FSS, we have the fraternal conversations. You can get in touch, send a message to the FSS, a private message to the FSS group, and we can book a conversation, completely private. There's always help. Looking for help while we're still here in this body is going to save us so much suffering, right?
And to your point about youth, right? Hey,
Mhm.
sometimes they are having lots of emotions during youth. This comparison with social media, this can trigger.
Yeah, hormones raging.
Yes, so this can trigger lots of thoughts, lots of feelings that they don't even know how to put in words.
Mhm.
But if parents can open the door for them to open themselves, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely something
Mhm.
that's going to be useful for them. And to your point also, I don't know if everybody saw on WhatsApp group, but now FSS has a youth group. So starting with 14 years old plus,
Mhm.
bi-weekly, right?
Yeah, bi-weekly, every
Every
second
second
Tuesday.
Tuesdays.
This coming Tuesday, we're having it, and then 2 Tuesdays after. It will always be announced, just
Yes,
like we announce the
bi-weekly.
talks on Sundays and the study of the Spirit's book on Wednesday. We're always going to announce. But yeah, and it's for youth, and it's directed by them. It's not a talk like we're having here. It's by theme. They choose a theme. They themselves research the theme, and then they bring for discussion. So it's dynamic. I was there. I had a blast. I loved it.
So another resource they can, if you know somebody in youth that have questions, because a depression can come also because they don't have enough answers for their feelings, for their
Yes.
thoughts, right?
From frustration, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And praying. Our biggest resource ever for everything is praying. It's that connection to God at the top. Well-being and also praying for others. People we know, people we don't know. Praying for anybody who committed suicide will do them so much good. So much. All right. And again, list of recommended reading. I can't believe I did it. I finished. So Spirit's book, questions 943 to 957. And like I said, at the end of 957, Kardec makes a comment that explains in much better way than I can the part about the vital energy and that kind of stuff. I recommend reading all the questions because Kardec asks about a whole lot of different situations, like what if I'm sacrificing myself to save someone else? Is this suicide or not? So he asks a lot of questions that I hadn't asked myself, but as I was reading, I was like, true, I had never thought about it. So, highly recommended. Gospel According to Spiritism, Chapter 5, items 14, 17, 28, and 30 all talk about suicide. Heaven and Hell, or the Divine Justice According to Spiritism, Part 2nd, example. So, Chapter 5, like I said, 9 examples of different reasons for and situations where people committed suicide and what happened to those people after. So every circumstance is a circumstance, every person is a person, but those 9 examples give us a fairly good idea of different situations. Memoirs of a Suicide, and this book is available in English and Portuguese as well. Suicide False Solution, both available in English and Portuguese. And Suicídio Falsa Solução. So they, this book is by Alírio de Cerqueira Filho and Projeto Espiritizar from Federação Espírita do Mato Grosso do Sul, Mato Grosso Spiritist Federation. And they turned this into video classes. So there are 16 video classes. They are in Portuguese, but you can watch it on YouTube with auto-generated subtitles. They aren't 100%, but I would go for like 75% accurate. So you can absolutely get a good idea of what they're talking about. And like I said, they analyze the book Memoirs of a Suicide, and they go through like from before he killed himself through the whole process he went through. Okay? All right. And Kardecpedia, I don't know, does anybody know Kardecpedia? No? Okay, it's a website and it's also a phone app. And Kardecpedia has the 5 books of the codification, plus the Spiritist review, or in Portuguese we call it Revista Espírita, and another 2 books that Kardec wrote. They have everything in Portuguese. I think there are only 2 books that are not translated into English, but they are like, they're not part of the codification. And they have it actually in 7? I think 7. Yeah, I think now it's 7 languages. So there's English, Portuguese, there's Japanese, Korean, Italian, French, which is the original. And you can also like compare in both languages. If we're reading in English, if you have kids and they speak pretty much English, you can compare Portuguese and English, for example. And like I said, it's also an app. And you can also search by topic. So if you go to the search bar within Kardecpedia, either the phone app or the website, and you type suicide, it's going to give you a list of questions from the Spirit's book, Gospel According to Spiritism, Heaven and Hell, the Spiritist review. It's going to give you a list of everywhere you can read about a certain thing. In our case, for example, today would be suicide. But this is for anybody who has more questions. You can also text me. I am in the WhatsApp group, Renata Genesini. So feel free to text me, ask questions. It's a polemic subject. It's not a pleasant subject. A lot of people try to avoid it, but we need to learn. We need to understand the reasons why. One of Kardec's comments at the end of question 957 is that he says that most religions condemn suicide, but they don't explain to you why not, why it's a mistake. They just paint it like an unforgivable sin. Nothing is unforgivable. It's not a sin, it's just a mistake, and it's not unforgivable. No mistake is unforgivable, ever. Through God's mercy, everything is forgivable. Okay? So we just need to understand, and understanding will take away the anxiety of not knowing why. Because not knowing can be anxiety inducing.
And I think like when you know people, you have relatives or friends, somebody that actually committed suicide, and you read the book, the Memoirs of Suicide, it can be anxiety provoking too. Like, oh my goodness, like people are going through that.
I started reading that book I think 4 times. I wasn't able to finish any of the 4. It was too graphic. It was too shocking for me. But after listening to the 16 hours of Suicide Fall Solution video classes, now I feel like I can, because getting to the end of the video classes, I also got to the part of the consolation, to the part that explains that nothing is unforgivable, that there's aggravating and mitigating circumstances. So that understanding, I feel, is going to allow me to finish the book now.
And I think
it is a very hard read.
One thing too that when I was listening to one of those lectures, that made me think is like, we can never forget that who is in charge of the Valley of the Suicides is Mary, the mother of Jesus. So she is there coordinating and giving
asked directly by him. He asked her directly to take care of the suicides of the entire planet. You can't be taken better care than by his mother. So, because he said that to treat a suicide,
just
only the love of a mother. Any more questions or comments?
Just a comment for people that are new to the Spiritist, right? To help them understand how the beauty of the Spiritism, how they explain the whole world, the whole law of God, is actually study the laws, right? The laws of God, how the laws of cause, effect, all those laws together, how they build this beauty that is the world, right? So understand and study the laws helps a lot. And also understand a little better the relationship between body, perispirit, and spirit, right?
Yeah.
Different religions, like Indians,
Yeah.
different
Many
groups
other
talk about
religions
that.
believe in reincarnation, but not explained as thoroughly as Spiritism does.
Yeah. So that's very important. Those two things together make a lot of sense and open a mind to understand.
Yeah, for anybody who's new to Spiritism, Spiritism is called reasoned faith. So we believe, like, the main thing is love God above all else. But we understand the reasons why. We understand the reasons why we believe. We question, and it's healthy to question. Anything that can't be questioned, a dogma that can't be questioned, doesn't make sense. To me personally, I don't want anything to be shoved down my throat that can't be explained through logic. I don't need it to be proven by a gadget. Not that kind of proof that I need. I don't need like something to measure the existence of God. I believe in God, but something that can't be explained through logic, to me, doesn't stick. But this is me personally. Okay. All right. We made it.
Thank you for
Well,
sticking with us patiently for 3 sessions.
3 sessions. Okay, well, thank you everybody for listening. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask after. So let's do our final prayer, and we're going to go to the classes. Let's close our eyes, calm our hearts. And let's feel this love that surrounds us. We are loved. We are very loved. First by God our Father. We are very loved by spirits who have long-lasting time connections with us. We are loved by incarnated people as well. Parents, friends, spouses, or children. There is always hope and help for those who search. Let's open our hearts to feel gratitude for what we learn, for all the help we receive from the higher. Let's take a moment to thank our Master, our older brother Jesus, who came and brought to us the solution, who told us to follow him. And let us do our best to feel the love from all those who love us, to feel gratitude for the divine providence that gives us everything we need to fulfill our reincarnation plan. we have all the conditions to learn to love God above all else. In ourselves, and all those around us, as brothers and sisters in humanity. Let's take the time to feel grateful to be incarnated, to be alive, to have the privilege of making decisions. Let us reflect and use our free will the best way we can. May we leave here today at peace and have a